Johnny Cash's life was a storm of glory, scandal, and haunting secrets buried deep beneath the man in black. From a childhood shaped by tragedy to the fiery rise of a rebellious music icon, his journey twisted through addiction, forbidden love, and shocking revelations that surfaced long after his voice fell silent. But behind the legend lies a truth even stranger than the myths America believed. The boy with dust on his boots and destiny in his bones. Johnny Cash stepped into the world in 1932 in a corner of Arkansas where dust ruled the land and hard times ruled the people. Kingsland offered no promises, yet it quietly shaped the legend to come. Born J.R. Cash, named by compromise, raised by necessity, he sat in the middle of 6 siblings, where love was loud, money was scarce, and survival was a family project. When the government promised desperate families a lifeline, the Cash clan grabbed it and moved to Dias, a patch of stubborn farmland where the red dirt stained everything it touched. Days were spent under punishing sun, picking cotton until their hands felt like they belonged to someone else. But in those endless fields came their salvation: music. The Cash family sang not for applause, but to keep hope alive. Then tragedy struck with a cruelty that left Johnny marked forever. His beloved brother Jack, gentle and righteous, was torn open by a table saw. He fought for life for a week before slipping away, leaving Johnny with a wound that would never truly heal. The loss hollowed him, echoing through every lyric he would one day write. Grief pushed him toward the only refuge he understood: music. With a guitar taught by his mother's patient hands and a soul cracked too young, Johnny began pouring his hurt into melody. Long before the world knew his voice, it was already carrying his pain. A soldier, a roller rink, and a love that didn't know its future. By the time the 1950s swept in, America was sending its young men halfway across the world, and Johnny Cash, still more boy than legend, didn't hesitate. He signed up, traded Arkansas dust for military boots, and found himself stationed in West Germany. The nights were cold, the loneliness colder, and the world felt far too big for a young man still grieving a brother he could never forget. Yet in the quiet hum of barracks life, Cash began to shape the voice and thoughts that would one day change music itself. Before he shipped out, fate brushed against him in the most unexpected place: a roller skating rink. Vivian Liberto, with her shy smile and quiet warmth, drifted into his life like a soft melody. Their conversations stretched long into the night, and letters crossed oceans as if carried on a promise. Johnny wrote from Germany with a longing that only distance can create, filling pages with dreams of a future neither of them had any map for. When he returned home, worn but hopeful, Vivian was waiting. They married quickly, 2 young hearts believing love could steady the chaos of the world. But marriage didn't come with instructions, and Johnny, still searching for who he was meant to be, felt the weight of adulthood settle on him faster than he could stand. They moved to Memphis, chasing opportunity with more faith than certainty. Johnny sold appliances by day, smiling through the disappointment of a life that didn't fit him. But each night told a different story. The music inside him clawed for a way out. He played with local musicians in small rooms thick with smoke and possibility. And though no one knew it yet, not his wife, not his friends, not even Johnny himself, the road was already bending. Somewhere ahead waited the fame he dreamed of, the darkness he didn't expect, and the woman who would complicate everything. Sun Records and the Awakening of a Restless Voice. Memphis in the mid-1950s was a furnace of sound, blues pouring from street corners, gospel thundering through churches, and a new electricity crackling in the air. Johnny Cash stepped into that world with nothing but a cheap guitar and a hunger burning deeper than he could name. Selling appliances kept the lights on, but every click of a cash register reminded him he was living someone else's life. His real pulse beat only when night fell, when he slipped into smoky rooms with a couple of local musicians and let the music drag the truth out of him. Eventually, he gathered enough courage to walk through the doors of Sun Records, the birthplace of wild dreams and revolutionary sounds. His palms were sweating, his voice steady but trembling at the edges. He sang gospel, his first love, his mother's love. But Sam Phillips, the man who could spot lightning in a bottle, just listened with a flat stare. Then came the blow. "Come back when you've done some sinning." It stung, but it also awakened something in Johnny. Sin wasn't hard to find. It had already been following him like a shadow. When he returned, he didn't bring hymns. He brought a sound that felt raw, restless, sharpened by heartbreak and longing. Rockabilly fire laced with country grit. This time, Phillips heard what he'd been waiting for. By 1955, Cash was cutting records. "Hey, Porter" and "Cry, Cry, Cry," songs that carried the thump of a train and the ache of a man trying to outrun himself. They weren't just tunes, they were warnings of a rising storm. And yet, as he hung around Sun Records with Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny was still searching for that one moment that would crack open the world. He didn't know it then, but fame was already inching toward him, slow and unstoppable. His life was about to accelerate into greatness, temptation, and a darkness waiting just beyond the spotlight. 4 legends, 1 room, and the spark that shifted history. Sun Records was never a quiet place, but on one extraordinary afternoon in 1956, the studio walls caught fire with something far bigger than music. Johnny Cash was there, lingering in the corners as he often did, watching, listening, letting inspiration seep into him like smoke. Carl Perkins was working through a guitar riff sharp enough to cut glass, and Jerry Lee Lewis hammered the piano like he was trying to wake the dead. Then, without warning, Elvis Presley, already a rising comet, walked through the door. The room shifted. Time seemed to lean in. 4 young men, each destined to carve their own place into American mythology, suddenly breathed the same air. They didn't plan it. They didn't rehearse. They just played. Voices tangling, laughter bouncing between microphones, fingers dancing across strings and keys as if some unseen force had summoned them together. And Sam Phillips, sensing something rare and unrepeatable, quietly let the tape roll. Johnny wasn't the loudest that day. He didn't need to be. There was a gravity to him, a quiet presence that pulled the music in a different direction. Darker, deeper, edged with the sorrow he carried like a second skin. In that room, among 3 flamboyant firecrackers, Cash was the steady flame that refused to burn out. Years later, the recording would surface as the $1 Million Quartet, a mythical snapshot of 4 future legends before they became giants. But back then, no one called Johnny a $1 million anything. Not yet. He was still the hungry one, the outsider, the man with a voice full of wounds and a future he couldn't yet imagine. What he didn't know was that the road to his first true hit was already unfolding. 1 heartbeat, 1 heartbreak, 1 song away. The world was about to hear Johnny Cash not just as a new singer, but as a force it could no longer ignore. The line he walked and the one he crossed. In 1956, the song that would change everything came to Johnny Cash not like a whisper, but like a vow carved straight from his aching heart. "I Walk the Line" was simple, haunting, and fiercely honest. A promise of loyalty from a man already wrestling with shadows he couldn't quite outrun. When it hit the airwaves, it didn't just climb the charts, it cut through them, landing on both country and pop lists with the force of something undeniable. Audiences heard devotion, a man swearing he would walk straight, stay true, keep his heart tethered to the woman waiting at home. But behind the microphone, the truth was beginning to fracture. Fame had a way of whispering temptations in the dark, and Johnny, lonely on the road, adored by crowds, tormented by ghosts, began to listen. Her name was June Carter. Bright, magnetic, and already a star in her own right. She carried a warmth Johnny felt long before they met. Elvis himself played Cash's records for her on jukeboxes during late-night tour stops, telling her almost prophetically, "You need to hear this man." And when Johnny and June finally crossed paths backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, it was as if recognition struck both of them at once, like they'd been orbiting each other long before the introduction. Their connection was instant, electric, and dangerously undeniable. But they were both married, bound by vows the world expected them to honor. So they stepped back at least for a while. Yet even as I Walked the Line echoed across America, the man who wrote it was already slipping toward a line he wouldn't be able to uncross, toward a love that would lift him, wreck him, and ultimately define him. A love that waited, a loyalty that broke. For Johnny and June, attraction didn't fade. It smoldered. But life, with all its tangled loyalties, pushed them in different directions. June Carter, despite the spark she felt the night she met Johnny, didn't run into his arms when her first marriage ended. Instead, she married someone else, placing yet another locked door between them. To Johnny, it was a confusing blow. Was it rejection, hesitation, or simply timing gone wrong? Whatever the reason, the distance didn't clean his conscience. Because even as he longed for June, Johnny Cash was far from a faithful man. Touring meant long nights, neon lights, and admirers who didn't care about wedding rings. Rumors spread like wildfire. Johnny was cheating, often, and the whispers didn't stop at strangers. Hidden beneath the glow of the stage was a darker truth. While flirting with June Carter, Johnny was also entangled with her sister, Anita Carter. The affair was reckless, messy, and dripping with the kind of danger that could shatter families. But Johnny was a rising star now. Fame had made him feel untouchable, like the rules didn't apply, like he could outrun consequence the same way he outran grief, through music, through speed, through denial. Meanwhile, Vivian Liberto, his wife at home, watched the man she loved drift farther with every show, every absence, every whispered name she wasn't supposed to hear. June, Anita, women who existed in the same orbit she was losing her husband to. Johnny's life was becoming a storm he didn't yet know how to calm, one driven by passion, guilt, temptation, and a destiny barreling toward him faster than he could steer. The world saw a man on the rise. He didn't yet realize he was also beginning to fall. Fame, fire, and the beginning of the spiral. By 1958, Johnny Cash was no longer just a hungry young singer. He was a rising force, a man whose voice could hush a room or electrify a crowd. He and Vivian moved to Southern California, welcoming their daughter Roseanne into a world that was shifting faster than either parent could control. But with fame came a new kind of loneliness, one that clung to Johnny even in the brightest spotlight. The road became his second home, and with it came long nights, restless minds, and the lure of the bottle. At first, it was just a drink to calm his nerves, to steady the exhaustion of performing. But soon, alcohol wasn't enough. Living in Nashville among other fast-living musicians, Johnny fell into the rhythm of amphetamines, small pills that promised energy but delivered chaos. What began as a way to keep up with the brutal pace of touring slowly tightened around him, making him jittery, unpredictable, and haunted by moods he couldn't control. Yet in the middle of this unraveling, something remarkable happened. Johnny released Ring of Fire, a song that would one day define his legacy. But even the origins of the song were wrapped in controversy. Whispers of who truly wrote it, what inspired it, and what its fiery imagery truly meant. June Carter said it came from poetry. Vivian suspected something far more personal, and Johnny himself, depending on the day, offered stories that didn't always match. Despite the confusion, the song soared. It burned through the charts with the heat of something undeniably powerful. But behind the success, Johnny's life was edging closer to a blaze he couldn't contain. A storm of addiction, secrets, and choices that would soon push him toward a breaking point. The world heard the fire in his voice. It didn't yet see the fire gathering behind him. The wildfire that nearly took him down. By the summer of 1965, Johnny Cash was living like a man chasing the edge of the world. Fame had lifted him high, but the pills and exhaustion carved shadows beneath his eyes. He craved escape, silence, solitude, a place where the noise of his life couldn't reach him. So he went camping with his nephew Damon, hoping the open air might quiet the storm inside. But instead of peace, the wilderness delivered disaster. Somehow, no one agrees exactly how, the camper they stayed in caught fire. Maybe it was a spark. Maybe it was carelessness. Maybe it was the haze of pills clouding Johnny's judgment. Whatever the cause, the flames didn't hesitate. They leapt, raced, swallowed the dry brush, and roared into a full wildfire that ripped through Los Padres National Forest, devouring hundreds of acres. When the smoke finally settled, the questions came. Authorities wanted answers. Johnny, still shaken, claimed a spark from the camper started it. But Damon quietly told another story. His uncle had lit a fire to keep warm and never noticed how fast it spread. The truth sat somewhere between guilt and memory, blurred by the chaos of the moment. The government sued. Johnny settled for a staggering sum, $82,000, a number as heavy as the guilt that followed him. But what angered the public even more was a single comment he made when told the fire had driven endangered condors from their habitat. Johnny, exhausted and frayed, snapped back that he didn't care about those birds. It was a moment that stained his public image. Another headline, another reason people whispered that the man in black was spiraling. Johnny Cash had always played with fire. This time, it nearly consumed everything around him. The outlaw image, and the truth that lurked behind it. Johnny Cash sang about prisons with a conviction that made people swear he'd lived behind those steel bars himself. When he stepped onto the stages of Folsom and San Quentin, dressed in black and staring down rows of hardened faces, he looked every inch the outlaw America wanted him to be. His voice rumbled with grit, empathy, and a strange familiarity, as if he knew the weight of chains, the echo of locked doors, the ache of lost freedom. But the truth? Johnny Cash wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a man who understood suffering so deeply that people simply assumed he had lived every dark lyric he sang. In reality, Cash had never spent more than a single night in jail at a time, and those nights were less criminal saga, more tragic comedy. Once, he was arrested for accidentally wandering onto private property just to pick wildflowers. Another time, police stopped him in El Paso, suspecting he was smuggling dangerous substances from Mexico. What they found instead were prescription pills. Trouble, yes, but not the scandal they'd imagined. Yet every small run-in with the law fed the public's imagination, adding fuel to the myth of the man in black, the rebel, the renegade, the hero for the forgotten. Even Life magazine wrote about him as if he were carved from the same stone as the men whose stories he sang. Behind the myth was a man unraveling. Addiction clouded his judgment. Exhaustion blurred the line between performance and reality. And while the world embraced the outlaw legend, Johnny himself was drifting, caught somewhere between who he was, who he pretended to be, and who he feared he might become.
Johnny Cash in the Tennessee 2.
A marriage under fire and a world turning against him. As Johnny Cash's public image grew darker, the shadows reached all the way into his home. His wife, Vivian Liberto, had already endured years of loneliness, wading through tours, rumors, and the slow drift of a man being consumed by fame and addiction. But nothing prepared her for the storm that arrived after one of Johnny's harmless arrests went public. A newspaper ran a photo of Cash and Vivian together, and suddenly something innocent turned dangerous. Vivian's skin, naturally darker due to her Sicilian and distant African ancestry, was enough to ignite the fury of extremist groups who didn't bother with facts. They saw a mixed-race marriage where none existed, and they unleashed hate with terrifying force, threatening letters, slurs, promises of violence aimed at a young family that never asked to be anybody's target. Johnny, already battling his own demons, now faced a world ready to condemn him for something he hadn't even done. The pressure only worsened the chaos inside him. Pills blurred his nights, alcohol numbed the days, and the man who once wrote songs of devotion seemed to be slipping through Vivian's fingers one reckless decision at a time. Their home, once a fragile sanctuary, felt more like the epicenter of a brewing storm. Vivian watched the man she married disappear behind addictions, headlines, and the relentless demands of fame. Johnny watched his family life fracture under a judgment he didn't know how to fight. And somewhere in the growing distance between them stood a truth neither of them wished to face. The world was changing, their marriage was cracking, and Johnny Cash was stepping closer to a point of no return, one that would force him to confront everything he'd been running from.
Left him out at night, the raccoons would steal him.
The crash, the wake-up call, and the woman who drew the line. By 1967, Johnny Cash was living at a pace no man could survive for long. Nights blurred into mornings, pills swallowed the hours between, and the world around him grew hazy until one violent moment snapped everything into focus. A car accident, sudden and jarring, sent Johnny straight into the hands of the authorities. They found prescription pills scattered in his vehicle, enough to raise alarms. But instead of throwing him into a cell and closing the door, the sheriff offered something unexpected, a harsh, honest lecture that cut deeper than punishment ever could. For the first time in years, Johnny felt the tremor of shame and possibility. Maybe this was the moment he could change. Maybe this was the chance to claw his way back from the edge. But when he returned home, ready to rebuild his life, he found another truth waiting. Vivian was gone. Their marriage had collapsed under the weight of rumors, addiction, and the constant ache of distance. And standing in the wreckage of his old life was the woman he had loved from afar for years, June Carter. Yet June refused to step into the chaos. She cared for Johnny, maybe even loved him, but she would not love a man chained to pills. She drew a line as sharp as any ultimatum: kick the addiction or lose her forever. So June and her family did something extraordinary. They moved into Johnny's home, not out of romance, but out of resolve. They cooked, prayed, watched him through the long, painful hours of withdrawal. They stayed when he raged, when he shook, when the darkness tried to pull him back. A marriage built on love and haunted by shadows. When Johnny Cash stepped back into the world clean and unsteady, June Carter was there, steady as a heartbeat. In London, Ontario, with an audience watching and his hands trembling more from emotion than nerves, Johnny dropped to one knee and asked the woman he had loved for years to marry him. June said yes, and a week later, in a small Kentucky church, they sealed a love story fans had long sensed, but never fully understood. To the world, it looked like redemption. A man rescued by love, a woman rewarded for her faith. And for a time, it was. Their home filled with music, laughter, and a gentleness Johnny had nearly forgotten existed. In 1970, June gave birth to their son, John Carter Cash, and Johnny felt a second chance blooming inside him. But shadows don't disappear just because you shut the door on them. Even with a newborn in his arms, old temptations tugged at Johnny's sleeve. Pills crept back into his life, slow and silent as fog. And in a moment that would later haunt him, Johnny crossed a forbidden line again, returning to an old relationship with Anita Carter, June's own sister. The guilt gnawed at him, the secrecy burned, and the relapse pulled him back toward the edge he had fought so hard to escape. By 1977, his struggle with addiction reached a breaking point, and Johnny checked himself into the Betty Ford Clinic, determined once more to reclaim the man June believed he could be. Their marriage was real, fierce, imperfect, held together not by fairy tale sweetness, but by two souls who refused to give up, even when the past tried to tear them apart. The Man in Black steps into America's living room. By 1969, Johnny Cash had lived a lifetime's worth of storms: addiction, arrests, broken love, redemption. That raw, unpolished honesty was exactly what ABC television wanted. They approached him with an offer few country singers ever received: host a national variety show, a weekly stage, a spotlight all his own. Johnny agreed, though Hollywood's shine never suited him. ABC promised creative freedom, but they also wanted big names: Bob Hope, Peggy Lee, the polished glamour of television. Cash accepted, but he didn't bend his identity for anyone, and soon his stubborn integrity was put to the test. When Chris Christopherson came on the show to perform Sunday Morning Coming Down, ABC demanded one small change: remove the word stoned. Too edgy, too real, too risky for prime time. Johnny didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He simply refused. On live television, he delivered the song exactly as written, unfiltered, unsoftened, true to the life he knew. The audience felt the truth in his voice. America felt the shockwave. But while viewers embraced the Man in Black on screen, his daughter Roseanne faced a quieter struggle. She had grown up watching her father disappear into fame, always headed somewhere else. Even as the show flourished, she carried the ache of years lost to the road. Still, the Johnny Cash Show marked a new era, a gentler stage, a steadier presence, a version of Johnny Cash who seemed, for a moment, finally at peace. But the calm wouldn't last. The spotlight was beginning to dim, and the final chapters of his life were already drawing near. The final curtain and the silence that followed. As the years pressed on, Johnny Cash carried both triumph and regret in equal measure. His music still cut straight to the soul, but his body, worn by decades of addiction, touring, and heartache, began to falter. Yet something remarkable happened in those later years. The distance between Johnny and his daughter Roseanne slowly narrowed. She had spent much of her youth watching him disappear into airports, hotel rooms, recording studios, always somewhere other than home. The resentment she carried was quiet but heavy, the kind only a child of fame can truly understand. But now, as the storms of his life calmed, father and daughter found each other again, meeting in the middle of old wounds and new forgiveness. Then came the blow no one expected. In early 2003, June Carter, the woman who had fought for him, prayed for him, and stood beside him through every rise and fall, passed away. Her absence carved a hollow space in Johnny that nothing, not even music, could fill. Friends said he seemed to age years in just weeks. His voice, once unbreakable, carried a tremor of grief he couldn't hide. 4 months later, on September 12, 2003, Johnny Cash followed her. Complications from diabetes claimed his life, but those who loved him believed something else. His heart simply couldn't bear a world without June. And just like that, the Man in Black, the outlaw poet of American music, fell silent. But the silence didn't last long. Because even after death, Johnny Cash had one more secret waiting to surface, one buried deep in his family tree, ready to rewrite a story he himself had believed his entire life. The truth beneath the legend. For most of his life, Johnny Cash believed he carried Cherokee blood, an identity he wore with pride, a story that fueled his passion for speaking up for Native Americans. It fit the Man in Black perfectly. The rebel heart, the solemn gaze, the sense of belonging to no place and every place at once. But years after his death, the truth surfaced in a way no one expected. When his daughter Roseanne Cash appeared on Finding Your Roots, she discovered something startling: no Native American ancestry at all. The legacy Johnny had cherished was a family myth passed down with love, not fact. Yet hidden in her DNA was another surprise: distant African ancestry, a quiet truth neither she nor Johnny had ever known. It didn't shrink his legend, it deepened it. Johnny had always sung for outsiders, and now his own history carried the echo of another long, silenced lineage. Meanwhile, far from genetic revelations, one small southern town chose to honor a lighter chapter of his life. In the 1950s, Johnny was once arrested in Starkville, Mississippi for picking flowers on private property. Decades later, in 2007, the town created the Johnny Cash Flower Picking Festival, pardoning him with humor and affection. A mistaken heritage, a hidden lineage, a forgiven misdeed. Even in death, the man in black kept surprising the world.